During my small break, I've been able to go back and look at my old videos, my old series, and look at what I was missing during those playthroughs and how I can make my future series better. And one of the playthroughs that I did was called Harry Harvester. Within this series, I travelled across the map and I spent a certain amount of days on a certain tile to set up a base, and the end goal was to eventually escape the planet. Now, in that series, I didn't use today's mod that we're reviewing, and I honestly don't know why, because it would have made my life so much easier at the time. The mod in question is the Real Ruins mod, an amazing mod that's been around for several years now, and a mod that I just thought I had to look at once again after all these years of not using it. So let's get into things and start with the content. So let's start with the content of the Steam Workshop page. What is there and what do we see? So we start off with the thumbnail of the Real Ruins mod, and honestly it's iconic, so I'm not going to give it any discreditation on that. Looking into the bulk of the Steam Workshop page, however, and there is a lot of text here. There's a lot of stuff that's been added by this mod and the way it's been implemented that isn't necessarily here. I would definitely love to see the inclusion of pictures of what's been actually added by this mod and how the certain things that have been added by this mod look like in game. It feels like a real missed opportunity to advertise this mod even more. I get that it's a historically and extremely good mod, and the legacy of this sets a precedent that doesn't really affect the Steam Workshop page, but for new players, they wouldn't really get it. I'd love to see some improvements here. So starting by looking at the content within the Real Ruins mod, what I wanted to start with was going through the mod options. And at a default level, these are all the options we're given. We're given the option to change the size of the ruins, the wealth amount, we're given an option to change the density of it, we're given options to change how many enemies spawn within certain events, we have the option to change whether it spawns haulable items, non-haulable items. The options here are great. For the sake of balancing and the sake of not spending too much time testing this mod, I'm going to be leaving everything at a default for the entirety of this review. So unlimited wealth, which is the default, and an unlimited amount of items to spawn. So loading into our very first world, how does this work? So before the Real Ruins mod, you just spawn in and it would just give you some ruins here and there and everywhere, and you could visit various tiles and you'd get some quests. Nowadays, we actually get given the option to spawn in blueprints. Now what this does is it spawns in a certain amount of tiles that it thinks is valid for the area and gives you all these certain areas to visit, which personally I think is really good. Gives you more things to do on the map, gives you more of a reason to caravan out and get more things, which I always think is amazing and really develops something that isn't necessarily done much within Rimworld. So with this we get access to several different places that we can visit and go and loot, starting with the temporary camp, the factory, the warehouse, the comm center, the city, military outpost, stronghold. Then in between all of these we have even smaller places that we can visit which are just classed as ruins. Now in my previous testing with this I did find one other one, but I couldn't necessarily recreate it here with the amount of time I had and what was going on, honestly. So there is several places that we can visit, and all of these seem thematically procedurally generated, which is extremely interesting, honestly, and really spices up caravanning out and makes things a lot more exciting. So as I quickly mentioned there, we have also been given access to these brand new quests. These brand new quests give us access to ancient ruins that generally speaking have a lot more loot in and have a lot more wealth at the cost of potentially losing colonists to enemy attackers. These ones are going to be spawning in just kind of randomly around your world, and they're going to be extremely valuable to go grab, and it can come in at different wealth values. So these are going to be ancient ruins, ancient cities, pristine ruins, pristine factories, and pristine compounds and things like that. These are going to be maps that people have made that have been kept in generally pretty good condition with a lot of loot and things still there for you to take. So that's going to be it for the content section here, and on the surface of things, not too much has been added here. A few quests and a few individual ruins that we can go and visit, and that's about it. But when we look deeper into this, we get access to so many unique situations. Because every single person that downloads the Real Ruins mods gives access to servers to download their maps and things and then put them into other people's games and everything, we get kind of like this lottery system for how we're going to get loot and stuff, which is incredible for gameplay. It's kind of like random for the players, if you kind of get where I'm coming from here. But out of all the mods I've ever reviewed, I've never had a mod that I've reviewed where the Steam Workshop page hasn't even said what's in the mod. Yes, we have like compatibility stuff and things like that in the Steam Workshop page, but this was the only time I've downloaded a mod, had no idea what I was getting into, and then been confused so much because I didn't know what I was looking for, didn't know I had access to, and it kind of threw me off a little bit. Yes, I like to laugh and joke and say, oh yeah, Steam Workshop page needs some GIFs and GIFs and things, but on this occasion, it's affected my experience in such a way that I didn't know what I was getting into, which I don't think a lot of players will actually enjoy and will actually put them off, especially if they're not aware of the Real Ruins mod, unlike I was. So for the content section here, I love this mod. This is, for me, as an experienced player, an incredible mod. But I think for new players, the accessibility, because of the lack of information on the Steam Workshop page, is going to be really off-putting to them. So I'm going to be very comfortably giving this an 9 or 8. We're going to be giving it a 9 out of 10. We're going to give it a 9 out of 10 for content, because it is extremely good in what it provides. The Steam Workshop page, though, it's just really missed the mark, in my opinion. So next, let's move on and look at the quality section for this mod. Now, funnily enough, I actually struggled quite a lot with a mod that only adds player-generated content. I mean, it'd be pretty horrible if I picked on one individual player and said, your base is shit. You know, it's pretty difficult to give an opinion on this mod. However, what I've done is I've generated some outposts and I've generated some bases, and what I found was really interesting here is when you actually look at some of the art pieces that have been spawned in, they stick with the same art description than what they had with the player. So some of them have got various names that you've never seen before, some of them are in different languages. These are small little details that I think really adds a lot of flavor to the world that you're actually playing in, and gives you a lot more sort of a story background with some different legends and things that you could see reoccurring into different playthroughs, which was really, really interesting as far as I'm concerned. But that's going to be it for the quality section. Apart from laughing at potentially some people's bases being really, really bad and some of them being really poorly made, there wasn't really much else that we could look at in terms of quality here. So I'm going to give it a very solid 6 out of 10. I don't know what I'm going to be looking at here for the quality section personally, and I mean, it was nice that I could see that the artwork kept the various descriptions that it's got, but that was about it, honestly. So next, let's move on to the balancing of this mod, and oh boy, there's a lot to look at here. For this section, what we're going to do is look at all the individual ruins and factories and compounds and everything, and look at what has been spawned in on this world. Now, obviously, because this is all player generated and completely random, it is generally speaking going to be very difficult to judge the balancing. What I'm going to be expecting here is all of the ruins and everything that are on the map all the time, they're definitely going to be worse than the loot that's being given from the individual quests, and they're all going to be kind of specialized depending on what they are. For example, I want to be expecting to see kind of materials and things from the factory, and from the military compound I'm expecting weapons and armor. So firstly, the temporary camp. This one I'm expecting just a couple of settlements and maybe a very small amount of loot. So here we have a very small kind of starter base here that you can tell somebody's very much early on in their playthrough from this. We go into the first room and 20 dining chairs. Sick! That's great from your temporary camp. This one makes sense, this one's fine, there's a few batteries as well. This is totally expected, nothing too overpowered, nothing too underpowered, something you may as well visit just to see if there's got something important. So far so good. Next we have the factory. Spawning into this one we have several buildings here, some of them merged into the mountain, which is kind of something we'll look at a little bit later in the compatibility section as well. Looking at what's actually been spawned in, we've got some bedrolls. Looking into another room, we have a very obvious old storeroom here with a lot of old materials and a lot of old leathers and things as well. This one is definitely worth going in and looking at when you're on your travels, because so far this seems really good. Next, the comm center. Spawning into this one, if you ignore all of the rain, there's not much here. Zooming in, there was a psychic emanator and some medicine and a wood-fired generator. That was it. No buildings, nothing. The psychic emanator is really nice, but I feel like that's not really communication, but that's just me. Maybe I was expecting maybe a few orbital trade beacons, maybe I was expecting a comms console, you know, comms and all that. This one, it seems balanced, but I don't think it necessarily fits the theme. Next, we have the military outpost, and as I said at the beginning of this section, I'm generally going to be expecting some weapons here. So when we load in and look at everything, it just looks like the temporary camp. Going into the largest room here, we have got a couple of weapons. Otherwise, very basic. Kind of disappointing, actually. Would maybe like to see some more weapons and things, and maybe some armor, but you know, it's just random, it's just chance, maybe I've just gotten unlucky. Next we have the city. This one is probably the largest amount of things that have been spawned in naturally in the world, and they're also one of the least common ruins to go and visit naturally. Spawning in, you'll notice that this is in a mountainous area, and it's very important because pretty much all of the ruins that are accessed on this map are in the mountains. Now, unfortunately, because of this, I had to go into dev mode in order to just see what there was. And there was an awful lot of stuff here, like a hell of a lot of things. But because it's spawned in the mountain, it's going to be very hard to access. It's pretty much going to be completely limiting any ruins that are in the mountains because it's just going to be impossible to look at everything. Kind of a shame, but there's an okay amount of stuff here. Nothing I would necessarily say is overpowered. Yes, there are some sleeve accelerators, and yes, there's some neural superchargers, but nothing I would say is like, whoa, this is crazy. It makes sense. It's the largest actual ruins that we can have permanently on the map that spawn in with stuff. It makes sense. But if this wasn't in a mountain, maybe this would be a little more overpowered. Who knows? Next, we have the Stronghold. To me, this is kind of more of a compact city, maybe more military focused. Looking at what's been spawned in, we've had a few meals and things. We have some art dotted around. There's not too much. There's a little workshop off to the side with a smelter and some unfinished components, but there's, once again, not very much here. There's a lot of stuff here in terms of buildings, but not actual items. This makes sense. It's fairly fair. Maybe I could argue and say there should be some more weapons and stuff, but hey, it's random. We can't necessarily balancing off that. So that's all of the permanent ruins that are on your map that you can go visit at any time, and generally speaking, I think they're very balanced from what we've seen. Nothing's been spawned in that's really overpowered, and nothing's been spawned in that I would just say, yeah, don't bother going to these at all. They're all worthwhile going if it's convenient for you at the time. So next, let's check out the quests. And what we're going to be doing is spawning in 3 quests. One at 1,000 raid points, one at 5,000 wealth points, and one at 10,000 wealth points. The assumption here is that each wealth point stage, they will have more and more stuff here, and we're going to see if that's true. So let's start by looking at the quest here that is 1,000 points in wealth. So the first quest we've got is the Sealed Factory. Spawning in, we have some friendlies on the map, and there doesn't seem to be much else until we zoom in. There is over 60,000 silver chilling on the ground. There is literally nothing else. But 60,000 silver is very nice. We kind of have a nice base level here, and seeing how this is worth 1,000 wealth points, we're obviously generally expecting the rest of these quests to be giving us a lot of stuff as well. So this is the factory. Bear that in mind. This is uniquely the factory, unlike the other quests that are going to be different. So next we have the quest that was worth 5,000 wealth points. Zooming in, there doesn't seem to be much here. It's definitely a lot bigger of a base, and there seems to be a lot here. Going into dev mode, deleting walls so we can see what's here, we have a lot of food. In fact, we have the death circle of corn here, and there is thousands upon thousands of corn. There's some other stuff here. We have some components, some weapons, some medicine, and generally speaking, we have got stuff here. But the holy death stack of corn is what we're here for, and that is about it. Personally, I don't see this worth being 5,000 wealth points. However, this is obviously a different quest from the previous one, so you could potentially hypothesize that the wealth points don't actually matter to these quests, more so the quests themselves. Then lastly, the quest that's worth 10,000 wealth points. Here we have some untouched ruins. Spawning in, we have a lot of friendlies, a lot of enemies here, and there is a huge base that's based on this river here. Honestly, beautiful. You've been watching it throughout most of this video as my background when I'm not speaking about something in game. This one was really unique, and I really like the way it's actually spawned in and shows how interesting it can actually work when the mod works. Looking at the items that are here, there's a lot of stuff here. We have a lot of vanometric power cells, we've got components, we've got beds, we've got resources, we've got silver, gold, plasteel, steel. Everything is here. There's a lot of stuff here and a lot of things to explore. However, is this worth 10,000 wealth points? Not really. I think that what I've generally come to as a conclusion from looking at all these different quests in terms of their wealth points mean nothing. This is a totally random mod and is based off of player generated stuff. So if the player doesn't have loads of stuff and it's generating this as well, it doesn't really matter. If you have a player that's got absolutely shed loads of advanced components and stuff on the floor and loads of persona cores, then yeah, those will also spawn as well. The wealth points mean nothing. The individual quest, however, makes a huge difference, and that is obviously going to be completely random as to what you're actually given within the time you're playing. So that's going to be it for the balancing of this mod. Now, generally speaking, I think all of the additions to this mod are balanced. It's obviously going to be very difficult to balance a mod with its default settings if all the content that's provided is player generated and is totally random. I get that, it's going to be difficult. Now, are the things that are accessed through this mod and the things that have been accessed through the player generated stuff balanced in such a way that it makes sense for the stuff that's permanently accessible and the stuff that's quest only available? I think the stuff that spawns in on the map, perfectly balanced. I think I have a couple of issues with the spawning in of stuff, and some of the theming doesn't necessarily make quite enough sense, but I was only testing one thing at a time, and that was it. Looking at the quests, yes, they don't make sense with wealth points. But the main thing for balancing for those is going to be the individual quests themselves. I'd imagine if you have one quest that's just an unsealed factory compared to pristine city ruins, there's obviously going to be a big gap between those, and depending on where you're at in your gameplay and what spawns in, it's going to be whether or not you're going to check those out. So for balancing, it's obviously very difficult to judge for something that's player generated. I'm going to be comfortably going for an 8 out of 10 here, just because I think we can maybe get some more accuracy with the wealth point system, and I think potentially there was a couple of the individual ruins that we could look at on the map that were maybe a little bit better or worse than others, but that is about it, and it's still a very good score. So next, let's move on and look at the compatibility of this mod. Are there any bugs that I need to know about, and how this fit with your playthroughs? Now, in terms of bugs, I particularly didn't have any issues at all. Obviously, there were some problems, as you saw, with spawning in mountains, but I'm sure you could just put that down to lore and stuff, and just say that there was a mountain that collapsed, and that's how it is. Looking at the Steam Workshop page, there's been actually quite a few reports of certain bugs appearing, whether the spawning of the ruins and the enemies and not being able to perform caravans, but honestly, I'd imagine most of the time it's going to be pretty minor, and it's going to be due to having enemies on the map and things like that. And obviously, because this mod is used in tandem with the player's own mod pack, obviously there are going to be certain items that can spawn, certain items that can't spawn, and I'd imagine depending on your dependencies and your mod packs itself, there's probably going to be some issues with that, if I'm honest. Then how this mod fit with your playthroughs? Now, I don't think that this mod fits in with too many scenarios. I don't think this fits in with the tribal era, don't think it fits in the medieval era, and I don't actually think it fits in with the spacer era either. This mod is perfectly suited for Rimworld, and I think with a playthrough that is Rimworld styled, you're probably going to be only wanting to use mods that are very Rimworld focused, the vanilla expanded stuff and the most popular mods that are available within the Rimworld era and theming. Because how else are you going to get the most out of player generated items and content without using what the majority of players are actually using? So for compatibility, there are bugs. And there are issues that I had that I didn't necessarily enjoy. And yes, it doesn't really fit in with many eras or many sort of playthroughs, but it fits in with Rimworld. And I mean, that's what we're all playing, and it's what the majority of the player base are going to be doing. So for compatibility, I'm going to cautiously give it a 6 out of 10. So next, let's look at my mod recommendations to go with this mod. And like I said in the compatibility section, you're kind of going to be wanting very basic mods, very vanilla mods in my opinion, just so you can get the most out of the content that's been provided by players that are uploading their maps to the servers, and just so then everything kind of works. So starting with the vanilla vehicles expanded, an absolute classic, great for hauling more and more cargo around the map. Next, we have Alpha Animals by Sarge, just so we can get even more animals to carry things around the map for us. Next, Yayo's Caravan to make the caravans look nice on the map, which you're going to be in the map very often. And then Better Traders, so they've got more money and will actually buy all the stuff that you're finding. I could obviously recommend every single vanilla expanded mod, because, I mean, that's what the majority of the players are using, and that's what the content you'll probably regularly be seeing it being added in these actual ruins itself. I think, unfortunately, because you're kind of relying on the most amount of content to be gotten from players using other mods that are similar to your mods, it kind of restricts your playthroughs a little bit. Obviously, if you don't mind what items you're finding and you're just there to look at the pretty ruins to see what other people have made, it makes no difference. And I know for me, it doesn't make any difference as to what items I'm finding, because most things that I want to be finding is going to be vanilla anyway. So for my mod recommendation score, I wish I could give it more, but it's just a little bit restrictive in what you can potentially use it within a playthrough. If you're like me and you like very vanilla playthroughs, this is an amazing mod. But if you like your expansive and extremely interesting mod packs, then it's maybe not for you. So I'm going to be very comfortably giving this a 7 out of 10. So now for my conclusion, and before we get into things, I want to make it very clear. I don't agree with the score I've given this mod. I agree with all the individual ratings I've given for each individual sections, but I personally rate this mod a lot higher than the score I've given it. I think this mod is amazing. I think this mod adds so much to your vanilla playthroughs and allows you to do so much more when you're going out on the map, and gives you an actual reason to go and visit individual places and trade with all the things on the map, which is something that honestly Tynan needs to implement more of, because we just don't really have much development in that regard. For content, I gave it 9 out of 10, quality 6 out of 10, balancing 8 out of 10, compatibility 6 out of 10, my mod recommendation score 7 out of 10, giving it the grand total score of 36 out of 50, which is an extremely solid B-rated mod. For me, it's an A-rated mod, but I can see that, you know, B rating is kind of fair when you look at everything within Rimworld. I'd love to see the Steam Workshop page improved a lot more. I'd love to see some more emphasis as to what's compatible, what isn't compatible, whether you should be running a very vanilla mod pack and things like that, just to try get the most out of players. And honestly, I think if just the Steam Workshop page, please just give me some more information. I want to know if I'm going to be using this in a medieval playthrough and have medieval structures pop up. I want to know if I'm using this in a spacer playthrough, that I'm going to have spacer things pop up. Some more compatibility things that are listed on the Steam Workshop page would have honestly made a huge difference to me, and I would have given it a lot higher score as a result. But don't listen to my opinion, check out this mod for yourself, and I highly recommend you do, especially if you're running a very vanilla expanded mod pack, which I think this mod is perfect for. So if you have enjoyed this mod review, please consider liking, subscribing, and make sure you tell your mum about me. I'll see you next time. Thank you.